When Jacob was born, I kid you not, he was pulling his brother's leg. Esau comes out first, head first, and on Esau's foot is a hand holding on to Esau. And so Jacob is coming out, following his brother with his hand on his brother's leg. And so they named him Jacob, which literally in Hebrew somehow means he pulls the leg. And Jacob actually became a deceiver, a jokester for his whole life. He was scheming and trying to get the benefit of other people. So pulling your leg is a good nickname. He's the leg puller. Jacob, the deceiver, the leg puller. So anyway, that's how he was born. Write that down. He was born pulling his brother's leg. Then Genesis 25:29, he did a scheme against his brother to get what's called the birthright. The birthright was the inheritance. So back in these days, the firstborn son would get 2/3 of the inheritance. The secondborn son would get 1/3 of the inheritance. Or the way it sometimes worked, if you had more than 2 sons, is that the firstborn would get 2 portions and all the other sons would get 1 portion. So the birthright was the bigger portion, the inheritance of the bigger portion, plus the land where they were living, plus all the servants and stuff. So anyway, Esau's supposed to get that when he gets older and when his father dies. And Jacob says, I've got a scheme. He goes out to the field and he cooks up this nice pot of stew. And his brother's coming in from the field after having hunted, and he's hungry. And so he says, can I have some of your stew? And Jacob says, sure, I'll give you the stew, just give me your birthright. And Esau, he's not the brightest tool in the shed. He decides that he's going to sell his entire inheritance, which means the whole birthright, for a pot of stew. Brilliance. But he does it, and so, I mean, that's dysfunctional. So Esau does it, and then Jacob wins. He gets the birthright. So if you're taking notes, jot this down. Jacob schemes his brother out of the birthright. And it worked. His scheme worked. Okay, look at the next one. Chapter 27. We already looked at that one. That's when he schemed to get the blessing. So write that one down. Jacob schemed his dad to get the blessing, and it worked. Well, after he got the blessing, Esau was mad, and so in Genesis 29, he runs away. And look at this verse here. What he does is Jacob is now visiting his uncle, Laban. And his uncle has a daughter who is beautiful to him, Rachel. And so Jacob says, I want to marry that girl. And back then, this was considered okay. He says, I want to marry that girl, and I will work for you for 7 years if you give me your daughter Rachel. And Laban says, okay, sounds like a good deal. So Jacob works for 7 years. And then they have this big party. It must have been a big party. I'll tell you why in just a little bit. They have this big party, and then Jacob gets married. And let's read this verse. It says, Genesis 29:25, when morning came, there was Leah, not Rachel. So Jacob said to Laban, what is this you have done to me? I served you for Rachel, didn't I? Why have you deceived me? Now that's dysfunctional. If you marry a woman and go to bed with the wrong one, that's dysfunctional. I mean, he's pulling a bait and switch. I got to tell you this story. Just about a week ago, we were finishing practice here, and at the end of our practice, Jake came up to me and he said, Jeff, I've got a great iPhone app that you got to check out. And in fact, this was it. You push the play button, and that's all it does. There's no game. It's just you see Rick Astley dancing to that song. And it's just I love that. Anyway, so that's what happened to Jacob. It must have been a huge party, because he goes to bed with the wrong woman. And I just love the way that line goes in the Bible. When morning came, there was Leah. When he pushed the button, there was Rick Astley. You know? Wrong thing. I was not expecting this. So he works for another 7 years and gets the woman that he really wanted. But now he's got 2 women, and he loves one of them. So here's the next one. Genesis 29:30. In 37 verse 3, it says, he showed great favoritism to Rachel and to his son by Rachel, Joseph. In fact, in 29:30, you see the line about his favoritism. It says this: Jacob lay with Rachel also, and he loved Rachel more than Leah. And he worked for Laban another 7 years. And then in chapter 37, verse 3, that's the story where Joseph gets this amazing Technicolor dream coat kind of situation. And that's because Jacob loved Joseph more than his other sons. So, okay, he's showing favoritism. Let's go on to the next one. In Genesis 30, I'll just give you the thing to write down here. Jacob schemes to get the best of Laban's flocks. He does this weird little breeding technique to try to get the majority of the flocks to have spots on them, so that, because he had made an agreement with Laban earlier that he could have all the sheep that had spots and stripes on them. So he does a breeding technique to make more of them with the spots and the streaks, and he keeps them for himself, and so Laban is left with a smaller herd as a result. And in the midst of all that, God still is blessing Jacob. He's scheming, and God is blessing him. One more on the back side. In Genesis 32, he's coming back to his hometown. Jacob is coming back to the land that God had promised him. And he finds out that his brother Esau, the one he schemed to get the birthright, the one he schemed to get the blessing, Esau is on his way to meet him. And Jacob's afraid. And so what he does is he spends the night praying. He says, God, would you please protect me? He says, God, would you please protect me from Esau? And then the next morning, he wakes up, and he comes up with a scheme of how he can solve this problem. He's going to send hundreds of animals in front of him. And every one of these animal herds is going to come up to Esau, and they're going to say, this gift is for you, 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 over and over and over again. So that by the time Jacob gets to Esau, Esau's going to be so overwhelmed with all these gifts that he's just going to say, oh man, I love you. You know? That's Jacob's scheme. Well, when it finally comes down to it, Jacob and Esau meet face to face, and Esau says, what's the deal with all these gifts? God's blessed me with my own stuff. I don't need your stuff. I just wanted to welcome you back. And so they embrace, and they have a somewhat healthy relationship at that point. And it's not because of Jacob's schemes. It's because of God's blessing. God answered Jacob's prayer. So, here's the question. Why in the world would God bless fearful and passive and ignorant Isaac and scheming, deceitful Jacob? Why would God bless these guys?